What does it mean to come of age? Does it matter who we are, young or old?
Let's find out.
We're the Joy Luck Club group, and this is our project.
The dictionary definition of coming of age is the process of growing up or entering into adulthood, or the act or an instance of reaching maturity. But this is a complex concept, and that only scratches the surface. Well, let's get into it. My name is Jim Blue, and welcome to Crash Course.
Before we define coming of age, first of all, let's define what the Joy Luck Club is.
My name is Jeff Yellow, and this is Crash Course. The Joy Luck Club is a book that highlights the differences between mother and daughter. The book tells the stories of both sides and the clash between Chinese and American cultures. The mothers in the series are all Chinese immigrants in America who have all faced their own series of problems against the culture and standing of women in China. These ideals in each section parallel their daughters' problems in some way, shape, or form, though not to the extreme of being uprooted from their family or to be someone's mistress at a young age. The central themes such as standing up for oneself can be seen in both the mother and daughter and manifests itself throughout the story.
So the book provides many opportunities in defining coming of age. We decided to take this and ask people their different opinions on how to come of age. So let's see what Mr. Fox has to offer.
I would say that failures a lot of times will make you grow up. A lot of times you don't believe what your parents tell you or don't believe what your teachers tell you until it actually happens, and then you look back and say, probably should have listened and done that. But that's part of just the experience of growing up, is having those failures and those obstacles that you have to growing from them and moving forward.
Mr. Fox's interpretation of coming of age particularly ties in with Waverly Zhang's story arc. Specifically, it ties in with her and her mother's argument about her being a chess prodigy. In this excerpt, Waverly has just run away from her mother after being embarrassed of her continuous bragging to other parents.
My breath came out like angry smoke. It was cold. I sat down on an unturned plastic pail next to a stack of empty boxes, cupping my chin with my hands, thinking hard. I imagined my mother first walking briskly down one street or another looking for me, then giving up and returning home to await my arrival. After 2 hours, I stood up on creaking legs and slowly walked home. The alley was quiet, and I could see yellow lights shining from our flat like two tigers' eyes in the night. I climbed the 16 steps to the door, advancing quietly up each step so as not to make any warning sounds. I turned the knob. The door was locked. I heard a chair moving, quick steps, the lock turning, click, 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 and then the door opened. "About time you got home," said Vincent. "Boy, are you in trouble." He slid back to the dinner table. On a platter were the remains of a large fish, its fleshy head still connected to the bones swimming upstream in vain escape. Standing there, waiting for my punishment, I heard my mother speak in a dry voice. "We are not concerning this girl. This girl does not have concerning for us."
And some would argue that this has nothing to do with coming of age. That would be correct. This is all about establishing tone for the next section. This next clip of coming of age is all about growing up. Years later, Waverly and her mother are talking about where Waverly should take her marriage. Here's the clip.
"You see it on everything. Made in Taiwan." "Aye," she cried loudly. "I'm not from Taiwan." And just like that, the fragile connection we started to build snapped. "I was born in China, in Taiyuan," she said. "Taiwan is not China." "Well, I only thought you said Taiwan because it sounds the same." I argued, irritated that she was upset by such an unintentional mistake. "Sound is completely different. Country is completely different," she said in a huff. "People there only dream that it is China because if you are Chinese, you can never let go of China in your mind." We sank into silence, a stalemate. Then her eyes lit up. "Now listen, you can say the same of Taiyuan is Bing. Everyone from that city calls it that. Easier for you to say. Bing, it is a nickname." She wrote down the character, and I nodded as if this made everything perfectly clear. "The same as here," she added in English. "You call Apple for New York, Frisco for San Francisco." "Nobody calls San Francisco that," I said, laughing. "People who call it that don't know any better." "Now you understand my meaning," said my mother triumphantly. I smiled. And really, I did understand finally. Not what she had just said, but what had been true all along. I saw what I had been fighting for. It was for me, a scared child who had run away a long time ago to what I had imagined was a safer place. And in hiding in this place, behind my invisible barriers, I knew what lay on the other side. Her side attacks, her secret weapons, her uncanny ability to find my weakest spots. But in the brief instant that I had peered over the barriers, I could finally see what was really there. An old woman, a walk for her armor, a knitting needle for her sword, getting a little crabby as she waited patiently for her daughter to invite her in.
How this excerpt shows coming of age is through Waverly's understanding of her mother, and her finally putting her defenses down. She uses aggressive diction to describe her mother, such as giving her side attacks and secret weapons. Immediately after this instance, Amy Tan, the author, uses irony to establish what has been perceived as an evil lady who only wants to do harm, as described humbly, with the antagonist merely having a knitting needle and a wok, which is a frying pan type of utensil. In this moment, Waverly understands that in seeing her mom as someone who only wants to criticize her for all these years, she forgets that she is her mother, and Waverly uses this to mature and come of age. Another opinion of coming of age came from this library staff member as we were putting this project together.
There was a moment that I had in my very early 20s when, and a couple of my friends corroborated this, had that same kind of feeling, when we did something we didn't expect, did something that would have been deemed grown up by us a week ago.
There's a corresponding text to this clip about coming of age in Rose Sue Jordan's chapter, Without Wood. Her and her husband are getting divorced and she isn't fighting against it. She's letting herself get kicked out of the home, and this passage captures the exact moment she stands up for herself and matures.
"I've already found a place," I said quickly, because right then I knew where I was going to live. His eyebrows raised in surprise, and he smiled, for the briefest moment, until I said, "Here." "What's that?" he said sharply. His eyebrows were still up, but now there was no smile. "I said I'm staying here," I announced again. "Who says?" He folded his arms across his chest, squinted his eyes, examining my face as if he knew it would crack at any moment. That expression of his used to terrify me into stammers. Now I felt nothing. No fear, no anger. "I say I'm staying, and my lawyer will too, once we serve you the papers," I said. Ted pulled out the divorce papers and stared at them. His X's were still there. The blanks were still blank. "What do you think you're doing?" "Exactly what?" he said. And the answer, the one that was important above everything else, ran through my body and fell from my lips. "You can't just pull me out of your life and throw me away." I saw what I wanted. His eyes, confused, then scared. He was Huli Hudu. The power of my words was that strong.
Now that we have the book's perspective, what does it mean to grow up in the 21st century?
The purpose of our second set of interviews was to compile people's opinions on growing up now. The most important factors are displayed on this chart. Comparing to the text of the Joy Luck Club, the disconnect in the book is between the mother's culture and the daughter's, similar to how Waverly suffers from the lack of cultural syncretism that we have today. Rose just lets everything get decided for her, which is a challenge for the 21st century, because today everything about growing up is considered handed to us. Like the 5-year-olds with smartphones that they didn't pay for themselves, didn't work for, which ties to the next point. Something important about the book didn't touch is that a majority of the interviews talked about how there was an excess of technology, which is both good and bad in how information can be spread, whether or not it's correct information, and the social aspect of technology. Growing up in the 21st century is so tech-centric that it's important to bring up, and is a problem unique to the millennials. Technology is a major difference between the book and now. Our definition of coming of age, thanks to these interviews and the Joy Luck Club, is growing up and losing all those aspects of being childish. A more specific example is not taking criticism personally like Waverly, or finally acting as an adult like Rose. It has to do with maturity, and it happens in steps. Coming of age is growing up little by little and doesn't happen all at once, but you can feel it and look back and say that you've become mature, and you have found your place.